What's up, everyone? It's Cody. Got some exciting news. For that tech meetup that we went to the other week, I actually got a small gig out of it to make a poster for an upcoming conference for the meetup group. And I noticed the other day that the person that commissioned me for that project is actually looking for someone to do some work with some p3.js projects. So it's looking like I might have another gig lined up, and it's all thanks to actually going out to that meetup. So that's pretty exciting. I'm pretty stoked about that. I've been slowly getting lots of stuff together, specifically getting resumes and all that kind of stuff. I didn't really necessarily need it for this work, but I'm getting excited to actually go to that conference that I made that poster for coming up. And yeah, things are just going really well right now. But yeah, day 112 of the Odin project. Today I added some features to the lexicon table, so let's take a look at it. So you're going to notice over here we have two search bars. One is for the attribute and one is for references. So the first one is just like the previous one that I showed you guys. It is going to filter the table by the attribute's name. The second one is going to also filter the large table, the table at the higher up level, so by attributes, but it's going to do it by references. So we have an attribute here called foam stabilities, and with this one you can just type in foam and it's going to show that attribute only because that's the only attribute with foam in it. And then this search bar is going to filter by the reference. So we see that foam has a reference of A and W root beer. If I type in A and W, foam stabilities is going to be one that shows up. See that's the case there. And we can also like combine these. So if I do C up here and I don't know, D down here, and it's going to filter for attributes that have an attribute name containing C and that also have a reference that contains the letter D. So you can see where this can be a useful combination for searching. Definitely could get more complicated with this, but I like this as a minimal feature because it focuses on those two parts of the sensory lexicon hierarchy of kind of that data structure that I'm thinking of. So it is a very focused application for the minimum viable feature. So it'd be nice if the user could essentially just search the entire table, but I think for right now I'm just going to focus on this and then maybe come back to that later on. But yeah, so I have this and I had to change up the layout a little bit. So you'll see that the edit button is actually going to appear down here. And in addition to that, I actually created the ability for the user to select references for this edit button to appear. You'll see that it says attribute selected. So this is still needs to be finished. Attributes can be selected. Oops, I just found a bug. It looks like if you click both of these and unclick one of them, then it's going to go away. So you need to make it a little bit more complex there. So that's okay. That's really kind of the first time I was playing around with this because I was making this all day long. So, but yeah, if you can select an attribute and then you can select an attribute, you can edit it. And then the idea is that you can also select a reference and edit that reference. And since they're very similar in that we're selecting rows, we're going to use similar functions and also the similar editing window to actually make modifications to both of those types of data. But yeah, let's take a look at the code to see what all this is looking like. So let's take a step back and go to our search. So we want to be able to search the table for attributes and to filter them. We also want to search the table for references and then filter the attributes. So this is actually a more abstracted version than the filter text that I was using before. So it's going to be not just a single string, but it's going to have an object that has properties filter attribute and filter reference. The handle filter will take an event that will be an on change event for both of these search inputs, and it's going to first get the value and put it to lowercase for the filter text. So that the text that the individual is typing, it's going to put it into lowercase. It's going to create a new filter text from the filter text state, and then it's going to check the event target ID, so the ID of these search inputs over here, and set that property within new filter text. So it's either going to be filter attribute or filter reference. Set that equal to the filter text lower. And then we're going to update the filter text state. So let's go down here. We have the IDs to differentiate between the two inputs and our handle filter being used on change. And then filter text is going to be sent down to the lexicon table. Within the lexicon table, we're going to see that it is used first to be destructured into filter attribute and filter reference. We're then going to use that filter attribute and that filter reference to only show attributes that contain filter attribute. That's the first condition that we're seeing within this attribute for each loop to build our data for the table. So it's only going to include attributes that include the pattern filter attribute. And then for the references, I'm not filtering the references specifically, but I am checking to see if the attribute contains a filter reference. So it's initially set to false up here, and then as it iterates over the references, it's going to check each reference's lowercase version, see if it includes the filter reference. And if it does, then it's going to set that contains filter reference true. And if that's true, then it's going to push that attribute's data to the data array that will be utilized in the table down here. Now, the other thing that I worked on today was actually making references be selectable to make this attribute selected and edit button appear. And essentially that was taking the attribute selected state and making it into an abstracted row selected state. It's initially going to be false. Since it's abstracted and we want to deal with attributes and references, we need to give it a row type and the row ID. The row ID is either going to be an attribute or a reference ID depending on the row type. But both of them can be handled the same way to update the state. And the state will only ever have one object in it, and that will either be a reference or an attribute. So I don't want them to be able to edit an attribute and a reference at the same time. I actually do need to add a little bit more in here to make sure it's not already having attribute or reference data in, but yeah, it's still a work in progress. So, but essentially, if the row type is true, or if it's not false, then it's going to set row selected to this object. And if it is false, then it's going to set row select false. That'll be relevant down here where we have our ternary operator to check if row selected is true or false, which will make this edit button appear. And that's going to be at this lexicon table level. So we have change row selected being sent lexicon table, and we'll see it coming here as a prop. We're going to use it for this handle row click, but we're also going to make this a callback because we want to use this within the expanded row that's going to be in this table as well. Before we get there, handle row click takes data as an argument, and if the data selected count is equal to 1, that means that a row has been clicked. And if the attribute data for that selected row is not false, then it's going to be an attribute row because it should have attribute data if it's an attribute, and we'll change row selected to attribute, so it's going to be row type and the attribute's ID here. Everything else that is selected but it doesn't have that attribute data is going to be a reference, so it's going to have row type of reference, and then the reference's specific ID here, and then everything else is going to be change row selected false. So we're going to use that handle row click all the way down here for the table itself on selected rows change, but also for this expanded component. So we have our expanded row. We need to pass component props to that expanded row within this data table component. So this is a React data table component library specific kind of structure that we have going on here in passing the props not directly to expanded row, but into data table component to be used in expanded row. So if we go to expanded row, go up here, we'll see that handle row click is a prop that we're going to expect. We're actually going to create a specific function here, handle expanded row click, taking expanded row data and using it for the handle row click we find in lexicon table. So that's going to be utilized down here on this specific data table within the expanded row. So that's going to be the references table here. And essentially what that means is that once we click this references select button, then the attribute selected edit is going to appear here. So I need to make this more dynamic and make this actually show that a reference has been selected, not an attribute. And then also I will need to make it so that once you click this edit button, you can actually edit that reference. So those are still things that I'm working on. Excuse me. But yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. So I will see you guys on Friday. Emily and I are going to another meetup tomorrow, getting out in social again and looking forward to that. But Emily won't be doing her video tomorrow because we will be out during the evening. So yeah, we'll see you guys on Friday.